John Schneider is the manager of the Toronto Blue Jays, who, of course, played to that amazing Game 7 of last year's World Series. And, John, I always love talking with managers after they get to participate in the World Series because they have fun stories about hearing from different people during the offseason. I know the Blue Jays didn't win the World Series, but I'm assuming that was the case for you, too.
Yeah, I mean, it was people kind of coming out of nowhere and from, earlier in your playing career, managing career, just earlier in kind of life, really, people that you hadn't heard from in a while. Everyone that I know around the game kind of reaching out and anyone that I ran into, friends, family, people within the industry, Blue Jay fans, really. I mean, kind of just we're just so appreciative of the series itself, appreciative of the way our guys played, and were kind of pulling for us a little bit. It felt like a lot of people that weren't Dodger fans were pulling for us too. So it's been an outpouring of support. It's been really cool. It's been really cool to energize the fan base in Toronto again a little bit, and um, there were, I mean, text messages aplenty. Had to really step up my notifications. I'm sure I missed a few still, but it was an outpouring of support. It was pretty cool.
So I've talked to some of your players, and the feedback I got was that it was, of course, losing the World Series is devastating. And some of the players, their perception was after about 10 to 15 minutes after the game, that a lot of the players are like, man, that was an experience. Like they were processing it. For you, and I remember seeing you on the podium after Game 7. How long did that process take for you?
A while, I tried to be very deliberate, and I told the guys this too. It's my first time. We had a few guys that had been in that, in a World Series before, not many, but I kind of just was speaking what my own approach was going to be was to take a minute or two or five a day to kind of be a baseball fan and understand how cool it is to be participating in the World Series and then get to work. So that happened usually earlier in the day, when
On your
before you
walk to
kind
the
of,
ballpark, I remember you telling us this story during the World
yeah.
Series.
Yeah, like, man, this is great looking around at the fans, looking at a city that's just totally ignited by what's going on. That happened earlier in the day usually, and then even when I got to the stadium a little bit, you see everything. It just there's so much stuff, so much extracurricular stuff and media, enjoying that and then getting to work. But after Game 7, it was kinda, it took a while to even collect myself a little bit, like, right after the game before I went in and spoke to the team, and that took a while because there was a lot of emotion going on with that group, and it wasn't until after that where you kinda said, okay, wow, let's take a step back and just realize what you went through. That process took a couple weeks, to be honest with you, because you're just so in it and then you're just out of it. So it was after the game, I tried to verbalize it to the players too, right after as much as I could, through some tears really, but appreciate what we did as a group, appreciate what we did for the fans, appreciate what we did for the game. It's looking back, I still haven't watched every out back, but I mean, one of the best series ever, I think, just in terms of ups and downs and highs and lows. So really at this point, you can appreciate kind of what you were in the middle of for every single pitch was nerve wracking.
Do you think you'll ever go back and watch Game 7? Or do you think that's one of those things that you were there, you lived it, and you don't need to be reminded of it?
I'm sure I will. We actually we, meaning myself, my wife, and my boys, this is probably a little bit before Christmas, we said, "Okay, let's do it. Let's watch Game 7." And we got to about a half inning after Bo Bichette's three-run homer off Otani, and then we kinda all said, "Okay, that's good. That's enough. We kinda know what happens." But I have watched the entire postseason up to that point just in the condensed games, like
Wow.
the 12 condensed games.
Okay.
I haven't seen the World Series. I haven't seen the Game 7 special on MLB Network or ESPN or anything, but there are things though when you rewatch them, you kinda I don't wanna say you forget about, but you're like, "Oh, yeah, that. Oh, yeah, that." "What oh, man, I forgot that happened. I forgot we cleared our benches in Game 7 almost." There's so many things that happen. I'm sure at some point I'll watch it, but it's still, you kinda know the ending. I'd be lying if I said there weren't times where you wake up in the middle of the night and you're kind of in the middle of a bad dream and you kinda are thinking for a different outcome, but they don't really come. Um, but yeah, at some point, I'm sure I'll sit down and just say, "Okay, let's watch this through one more time," and probably a good way to move on to 26.
Yeah, as there, a few years ago, what Dennis Eckersley threw out the first pitch to Kirk Gibson, right? And Ralph
Yeah,
Frank and Bobby Thompson became great friends. It's part of the
yeah.
process of something amazing like that because it really was the best World Series we've ever seen. So how did that all fuel your first conversation with the players yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it a lot. I talked to a lot of different staff members and people, and I tried to reach out to as many people as I could that had kind of been through that, being to the World Series and not winning it, and kinda, what that looks like going forward in an off season or what that looks like going into the next spring. And kinda where I landed was I thought I'd be a fool to not, acknowledge the past, and just acknowledge some of the individual performances and the collective kind of unity that the team had, that fueled a lot of what was likable about us. So to kinda not forget about that, but then really focus on the present, and what did that mean, and what does the last couple years mean for the Blue Jays right now? And then what process are we gonna hold on to that got us there, right? So that was my main thing is, yes, it was a very successful season. Yes, it was unbelievable experiences that we need to all learn from and draw from and take into this year and for the rest of your careers, really. And hopefully things get a little bit slower or easier in different situations. Um, but really the main message was I don't want anyone to think that we're defending the American League East or defending the American League title. Every team has no record. It's the work starts again, and appreciate what you did and how you did it, but look for ways to get better, look for ways to continue to be great teammates, and look for ways to continue to be just obsessed with winning. And if we do that, everything will take care of itself because we're a really, talented group. We're a really close knit group. And, but the main thing is we have to attack this year as we do any other year and not rest on the success that we had. And then really when you get into the postseason, it's a 3 weeks of playing well. You know what I mean? So what did we do in the regular season that was sustainable too?
So I'm curious if you felt this and maybe people were calling you about it during the off season, but there was so much commentary in the sport about how the perception of how great your clubhouse was, your culture was, and the strategy of contact. I mean, we saw teams
Yeah.
like the Giants really specifically copying that. How you get a lot of questions about that during the off season from folks with other organizations?
Yeah, and, especially winter meetings, I heard from a lot of different people throughout the game, that I know. The common thing was everyone said, "Man, you guys play the game the right way," and it was refreshing to hear that, and then you heard from a lot of people that when did you guys decide to just be this team that makes contact? And it wasn't like it was overnight. I think it kind of evolved because we always had players that made contact, whether it was George or Vlad or Bo or Kirky or Ernie. Um, and then you add like, Jimenez, Miles Straw, Tyler Heineman, Nathan Lucas, they all kind of came together. And then I give a ton of credit to David Popkins and Lou Ionati, where those skills were there on our players, but they kind of got a little bit more out of them in terms of driving the ball or really being convicted in an approach. So the skills were always there. And then I think they just got enhanced with some really damn good coaching. And then once we realized that, it was kind of like, okay, this is a sustainable postseason way to play. We're not
Yeah.
going to shoot ourselves in the foot. We're going to play great defense. We're going to put the ball in play and put pressure on the other team. When the home runs come, that's when we're hard to beat. That's when you see some of the scores that you saw against New York or LA, early, where all things were kind of clicking. So it was cool to watch that unfold. And I think over the past couple of years, we've always played good defense. We've had really good pitchers come here and continue to get better here. So um, it was nice. It was nice to get recognized for it. And then what the group did though, and this goes back to the culture part, was they owned what they were good at, and I didn't ask them to do anything they weren't good at, and they kind of just really grabbed onto that. So you don't need to hit a double or a home run here. Like get a guy over, maybe a sac bunt, put the ball in play. That's a run. So we understood, I would say probably starting in like June, it was like, okay, this is how we play. There's going to be a little bit of wiggle room, for this or that. Let's try to get to 5 runs. Our record was great when we got to 5 runs because of how we were built pitching and defense. And how do we do that? So it was a collective effort, but once we kind of got it, we kind of ran with it.
Vladimir Guerrero Jr., it felt to me, I mean, he'd always been a star, right, since he got to the big leagues. We've known him since he was a teenager, but I have talked to people in the sport about how it felt like he went ascended from being a star over the last 7 weeks into this absolute incredible leader, and I've heard
Yeah.
stories from people with the Dodgers who could see that, well, how much he was impacting other players. Tell me what you saw in him in terms of his ascension.
Yeah, I mean, people forget, like, the week or so before the regular season ended, he was grinding a little bit,
Yeah?
there hadn't been homers and hits were hard to come by, so I said this, I think, before the division series, you could see a little bit of a different, Vladimir, just in the way he was moving, talking, walking when we were getting ready for the DS. And then at that point, and he said it, I think it was just solely focused on winning. Whether people like to admit it or not, people they want to, having a good year, get their numbers, this and that. It's all about winning. And he was so laser focused with everything he was doing, his preparation, his attention to detail. Um, so really, I mean, he had been in the postseason before, but a wild card round, and that was it. And with each round, it seemed like he got a little bit more focused and a little bit more focused, and he did it on every side of the ball. It wasn't just in the box; it was on the
Crazy.
bases.
That
It
double
was on.
play in game
I,
7, which is
I mean, it's
remarkable.
like he's that good, and I think it was a cool chance for the world to kind of see what a complete player he is. And there were times, man, and during the World Series, I forget what game he said. It might have been Game 1 at home, where we're in the dugout and the lineups have been announced and the anthem was done, and we're kind of just waiting for the game to start in the dugout. And Vladdy, it was a little quiet, it was everyone was a little tense, and Vladdy, loud enough to where everyone could hear him, said, "Hey, if anyone's nervous, just look at me." And he had a little grin on his
Wow.
face. But he was serious. He was just in full like flow state of I'm gonna go out there and just be the best player that I can be. And it just carried over game by game. It was remarkable. He's always had that. But I think he was just so focused on the present moment. It was really cool to watch, and that's just gonna be great for him going forward.
Yeah, and guys are leaders like Kyle Schwarber and Aaron Judge, CC Sabathia when he played, but it's not like that happens. It's not like they entered the big leagues as leaders. At some
Right.
point, it's like they cross that Rubicon into being that guy, and it felt like we saw that in Vladdy last year. Last one,
Yeah.
first impressions of Dylan Cease.
Oof, stuff. I mean, you see the stuff. I mean, I don't want to say you get to know a guy in a Zoom call. Like we've had some guys that know him a little bit, the character, the personality, the stuff is the stuff. When we met with him initially, talking through some areas of opportunities, maybe for him in terms of developing some pitches or getting a little bit more out of this or that, really easy to see how intellectual he is and how eager to learn he is. So that hit us from the get go. And the deal came together very quickly. About a week after that, we had signed him. Um, and then getting to know him, he is very cerebral. He is very, very aware of what he's doing and how he's doing it and what adjustments to make. So to hear him say, for as good as he is with the stuff that he has, to hear him say like, "Hey, I'm still an unfinished product." You see the humility and you see kind of the awareness part of it too. So he's been awesome. Getting to know him and kind of how he ticks off the field is pretty unique, with some of his hobbies and stuff like that. And he's fit in really well. I feel like for whatever reason, when pitchers come in, the Pete Walker and the guys that have been here, they just do such a good job. Whether it's Beeps coming in at the deadline or Eric Lauer stepping in the rotation or Trey Savage coming up as a kid into the rotation, they just kind of mesh. And both Dylan and Cody Ponce, they kind of haven't missed a beat since they got here. And Dylan's been awesome, and I can't wait to watch him go out and compete.
All right, John, thanks for doing this. I will see you next week in Florida.
Awesome. Thanks, Buster. Appreciate it.